Welcome to Eggy's Planet. My name is Steph and I've recently launched a new small business. I am going to talk to you candidly about Etsy as someone who made their first Etsy shop in 2020 and someone who launched a new Etsy shop in 2024. Spoiler alert, it didn't end up so good. And this is for people who make their own products, who design their own things, make their own jewelry. If you're thinking of launching an Etsy in 2025 or you're on Etsy and not really sure how you feel about Etsy, I really do recommend this video because I am going to be very honest. Spoiler, there's going to be some Etsy slander. I've been on Etsy since like 2020. I have a lot to say, so let's get started. Let's talk about where I was in 2020 when I first launched my Etsy and what Etsy was then. Back then, Etsy was they were known for like handmade small businesses. Like you wanted a small business experience, you went to Etsy, and that's like from packaging and like the small business touch. And back in 2020, I had been drawing for fun and posting on social media. So I will get that out the way. I did have a social media audience. And I think at that time, someone had asked me, oh, do you sell prints? I didn't know the first thing about selling anything. Being genuine, I had about £5 to spare at that time. So at the time, Etsy was definitely good for small businesses who didn't really know how to be a small business and didn't want to feel overwhelmed by all the things that come with being a small business, such as like having your own site, the branding, the taxes, the shipping fees. Etsy pretty much take the steering wheel. You just have to upload your listings, put in just basic shipping fees. They sort out the taxes. You don't need to worry about how your platform, how your shop looks. Etsy was pretty much very basic, very easy to get the hang of. They used that like £5-ish to start just putting up some listings. I think at the time, I haven't checked, I think it was about like 20 cents or something like that per listing. And so it wasn't a huge expense for me to just like put some listings up on Etsy, upload some listings. I was ready to go. I didn't have to think about all the extra things. And that was really good at the time because there's a tendency to get overwhelmed. You think about all the things you need to do to be a good small business. The prospect of all these things kind of stop you from like taking the first step. So I had my Etsy. I was doing pretty well. I was getting, I think as of today, that Etsy has about just under 3,000 sales. But the thing about Etsy is that the things that were good for you when you first started become kind of detrimental later on. It was good at the start that Etsy took control and took the steering wheel, but as you get used to running a small business, there's a lot of things you wish you were in control of. Etsy pretty much can say and do anything. Once you get to a point where your income is dependent on Etsy, you kind of feel like you have a boss. If you're like me, part of why you want to have a small business is that you want it to be successful and you want to be your own boss. Having Etsy tell you, well, you've reached a certain sales threshold now, so we're going to take a bit more. We're going to take more Etsy fees. And Etsy telling you, hey, actually, we're going to put your money in a payment reserve just out of nowhere. So you're not going to get paid unless you do this and do that. And we're going to hold the money for 90 days. You start to feel like you're working for somebody. That was my honest feelings. And so I use Etsy as a springboard, and I said, you know what, I'm going to make my own platform, and I moved to Shopify, and I also kept my Etsy. I will say right now, if you're thinking everybody delete your Etsy, no, not necessarily, but one thing I will say is that it's detrimental in the long run to rely entirely on Etsy when they have complete control over your livelihood. You want to have something set up, and I quite quickly used some of my money to set up a website on my own with Shopify. It's up to you what platform you prefer to go to. I find it really easy. Once you are past the overwhelming stage of, I don't know how to run a small business, I don't know how to send things, I don't know how to ship things, I don't have this, I don't have that. Once you've got over that stage, you quickly realize that Etsy is kind of restrictive. Another reason people tend to join Etsy is because they don't have an audience. The marketplace was supposed to be an ideal place for them to find their audience. It's oversaturated, babes. I don't know how to tell you. Like, there's just too much competition. There's this perception that the marketplace will help them be discovered. And it can be true for some. I will say it didn't really work out that way for me. Most of my traffic came from my social media. I do one thing wrong, they're like, we're gonna hide you from listings. So back in the day, whereas Etsy was known for like people who design their stuff, handmade jewelry, etc., nowadays Etsy is overrun by AI art, drop shippers, and people who want to make as much money as fast as possible without really putting in the creative thought and design that a lot of small businesses have done so. Etsy is now letting these businesses just kind of take over, honestly. And so in theory, the marketplace is a good place for you to be discovered if you don't have an audience, if you're not present on social media. Someone could find you. but they could also find these other shops, and they're more likely to find these shops because unlike you who spent time, designing things, making things, thinking of your brand, your product, a lot of these shops haven't done that, and they're happy to sell their stuff for as cheap as possible. And you're in direct competition with these people in this marketplace. And it's like, you spent a long time, for example, making those enamel pins. From your brain into Procreate, to contacting manufacturers, to receiving them, to packaging them. You are now fighting to be seen in the marketplace above all these listings that are selling their stuff for super cheap, have like star seller this, and just like Etsy is just not for the artist, it's not for the small business, not for the creative anymore. And if you are creative and you're thinking, let me launch in 2025, and you're like me who was in 2020, didn't have much money, I'd really do recommend really think about things in the long term, because Etsy for me is good in the short term if you just want to get your foot in the door, but it's not anything I would recommend in the long term. If we fast forward to 2024, let's be candid, I was broke again. I didn't have enough money to really invest in a new small business. So I said, okay, just like how Etsy was my beginning for my first small business, I'm going to use Etsy as a springboard this time. I'm going to make an Etsy for Eggy's Planet, and I'm going to straight away use any money I make to invest in my own platform. But I was also thinking about domain names, and I was just like, this is too much for me. I just want to get my foot in the door. So let me start with Etsy. I think that's my thank you. That was my Patreon card. Intermission, small intermission came. Oh, the print is cool, the colors are right. This one was a moss design, and I wanted to make it wintry without making it too Christmassy. I really hope you like it. This is honestly my favorite one so far. I am a bit obsessed with moss. I also have a sticker sheet for Patreon. I got so much cuteness aggression. I just think moss is so silly looking, but in like the cutest of ways. I'm having so much fun making these Patreon postcards. I really hope I can get more patrons to send them to. Just like in 2020, when I didn't have much money to like really invest in a small business the way I wanted to, I was thinking, okay, I'm gonna do it like in 2020, make my Eggy's Planet Etsy. As soon as possible, I'm gonna move to my own platform. Just do the basics just to get my foot in the door, because I don't like to feel too overwhelmed. I feel like sometimes being overwhelmed stops me from doing things. So I'm setting up my 2024 Eggy's Planet Etsy, and I'm thinking, yeah, it's just gonna be like 2020, let's go. I've done this before. And it's like, setup fee, like £11. But it was a shock to me because back in the day, there was no setup fee. And I'm thinking, you know what? I'm just gonna pay it because maybe they know something I don't, and the £11 is worth it, and it's for this and that. Let's just go ahead. I can't let this stop me at this point, because if I don't start, I'm not gonna start at all. Spoiler, they shut my new shop down within a week. They took my setup fee and then they shut me down. And then I was like, but I didn't do anything. Like, what's going on here? I appealed. And so within a minute of appealing, like saying I didn't do anything wrong, they have like this form you have to fill out. I haven't been able to put listings up, haven't been able to get my first sale, anything like that. I just made the shop. I had an Etsy since 2020. I was naive in thinking that Etsy was the girl that used to be, because she's not that girl anymore. And so nowadays I consider it a blessing in disguise. They can shut your shop down just like that very quickly, and there's nothing you can do about it. It's better that I had that wake up call then, before I really started making sales and establishing my Eggy's Planet brand on Etsy, because if that had happened when I had 1,000 or money in my payment account and they just suspended my shop, I'd be at Etsy HQ the next day, because there's no way. As a consumer, one of the main things you want is obviously stuff you like for an affordable price, but also from a reputable site. So before you even launch or like open your Shopify or Big Cartel or whatever you choose, I recommend setting up a sort of review system. While you're thinking of all the things like shipping fees, domain names, think of that also as a priority. One of the main reasons we shop on Etsy is because we feel safe there. If something happens, we have Etsy as a middleman. So one of the main things I would say, if you are thinking of launching your own shop, which I do recommend, immediately set up some sort of reviews app. I just want to say, I'm not sponsored by any of these people. We're just having a chatty chat. I am currently using Judge Me on Shopify, and I'm using the free version. And what it means is that as soon as I start getting reviews, at least people coming to my site know that people are receiving their stuff and are happy with it. Even if your stuff is way cheaper than on Etsy, people are still going to go for Etsy because they at least know or feel that they're going to receive their stuff. And if they don't, they have someone to like complain to. I'm not going to sugarcoat things. It's not going to be an easy start. It hasn't been an easy start. It's been very quiet in my shop. But one of the main things I would say to focus on is building up trust. As a small business, if you're thinking of the short, try and make money as quick as possible, maybe Etsy's for you. But I do know that Etsy has been a struggle for a lot of creatives, like people who make their stuff. They are in competition with people who don't really make their stuff and they don't have any attachment to what they sell. So they're okay with selling it for like dirt cheap. Nothing wrong with having an Etsy on the side, but I strongly recommend don't have it as your main income. I don't want you to be in a position where you have money in your payment account and your entire income is Etsy and they've decided that you've broken their terms and conditions. And they're not going to tell you what you did, because that would be too much. You just broke them and therefore your shop is done. You don't want your small business to be in a position where it can end just like that at Etsy's whim. I experienced that with my 2024 attempt at launching a new Etsy. They suspended my shop and I have no idea why to this day. Even though I'm not making many sales with my current shop, for me, I don't think there's a guarantee that you're going to make many sales via Etsy anyways. And when you do make sales, they take so much money nowadays. Like, it's so crazy to me how they have the audacity. I'm sorry, I have to say, I feel like, oh my gosh, what are you doing here for you to take that much? Like, I would definitely recommend having your own shop and having your own platform. If you feel like the marketplace is beneficial enough for you to want to launch an Etsy, that's understandable, that's valid. I also felt that way initially until they, suspended my shop. But I feel like if you do have a small business, most people are also willing to put in the work on social media and willing to be present there. If you are present there, from my experience, most of the traffic comes from your own sites, not the marketplace. Nowadays, there's way too much competition. They've introduced like all different sorts of badges that you have to do in order to be seen in the searches. It's just too much. You are better off, in my opinion, having your own platform and maybe having an Etsy on the side if you prefer. Again, nothing wrong with having an Etsy. I do want to say, let's be honest, I'm a little bit bitter that they took my setup fee and suspended me. So if you can feel that like animosity, I apologize. I've had an okay experience with my first account and a bad experience in 2024 trying to launch this new account, and I feel like it's only getting worse. And I knew that when they emailed me saying that if I don't send this information to them, that they're going to put my account on vacation in 50 days by force, whether I like it or not. And it's just a reminder, all the things you find beneficial about Etsy kind of become obsolete later on. And if you're somebody who's thinking about longevity, then you don't really need Etsy. I would recommend just starting off on your own platform. If you're someone who you're playing the long game and it's going to be slow, go ahead and make your site. Understand that you may not get orders straight away. And as of right now, with Etsy setup fees and the money that they take away and like all the extra little hidden things that they do, it's not that much more expensive to launch your own site. You don't even have to worry about domain name straight away. You can have a My Shopify, for example. Like, I think as of November 2024, I believe the first month on Shopify is only £1. You can get yourself acquainted, use that time to have a look at themes. I'm having a great time on Shopify, not necessarily with the sales, like I'm not getting many sales, but I like having control over my own small business. Like I said, nobody wants to wake up to an email saying that you've been suspended. That dreaded red bar above your shop saying, you have been suspended, la da da da, appeal, you appeal. Sorry, it's not being reinstated. Bye. I think to alleviate that potential anxiety of like that source of income being gone, I definitely recommend making your own shop. Price things how you want to price things, because it's your art, it's your product. And next to you is not like someone selling something similar for £2. Do you know what I mean? That's what the marketplace in Etsy feels like. And I said earlier on, this video is for creatives, people who design and make their stuff. So if you're still watching and you do AI art, sorry, this one is not for you. I feel like the cons outweigh the pros of having an Etsy and launching an Etsy. All the things that are positive about Etsy, if they decide to suspend your shop, which they can and have, then it's pretty much over. But you decide whether it's worth it just to get your foot in the door. If you do feel like you are able to use Etsy as a springboard until you're ready to have your own shop, then that's completely fine, just as long as Etsy is not your main form of income. But for people who already have Etsy, for any order you get, I would like sneak a little card in recommending your Shopify platform or your Big Cartel or whatever platform you choose to make your site on. Let them know that it's 10% off or some sort of incentive to kind of bring your customer base from Etsy to something more stable, like your own platform. I got suspended from Etsy in 2024 and I made my Shopify, got my foot in the door. We've begun building up a small audience. If you would like to join the audience, then be sure to subscribe. I have so much planned. I actually have all the stuff I need to move on to doing my Sweet Dream Style polymer clay collection. Next video, I am going to get back in my creative bag. So to finish out, I just want to say thank you so much for watching this video, and let me know if you are on Etsy and how you feel about Etsy. I'm looking forward to seeing if anybody has a different view, if you agree. Leave a comment if you do. Don't forget to leave a like. I'd really appreciate it. Yeah, until next time.